The moon was just a sliver in the sky as I trekked deeper into the forest. My friends had dared me to spend the night out here alone, and I never one to back down from a challenge had agreed. The forest was eerily silent, the usual chirping of crickets and rustling of leaves. Absent, every step I took seemed to echo through the trees, making me feel like an intruder in a sacred place. I set up my small tent in a clearing surrounded by ancient, towering oaks. The canopy above was so thick that only faint traces of moonlight filtered through, casting strange, shifting shadows on the ground. As I gathered firewood, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I told myself it was just nerves and continued with my task. By the time I had a small fire going, the temperature had dropped significantly. I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat close to the flames, their warmth providing little comfort against the growing unease gnawing at my insides. The forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As the night wore on, I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible whispering carried on the wind. I strained to listen, but the words were indistinguishable, a murmur just beyond comprehension. I tried to convince myself it was the wind playing tricks on me, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent until they seemed to surround me. I stood up, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding small and weak in the vast darkness. There was no answer, only the relentless whispering. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it into the trees, the beam slicing through the darkness, but revealing nothing. Suddenly, a figure darted between the trees, just at the edge of the light. I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who's out there?" I shouted again, my voice trembling again. No answer, just the whispers and the occasional rustle of leaves. I decided I couldn't stay out in the open any longer. I retreated into my tent, zipping it up tight and clutching my flashlight like a lifeline. The whispers seemed to close in, growing louder and more chaotic, until they were a cacophony of voices all around me. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, the whispers stopped. The silence that followed was even more unnerving. I lay there, barely daring to breathe, every muscle in my body tense. Hours passed, or maybe it was just minutes. It was impossible to tell. Then I heard it, a slow, deliberate scraping sound, like something being dragged across the ground. It was coming closer, moving steadily toward my tent. My mind raced with images of what it could be: a wild animal, a ghost, something worse. The scraping stopped right outside my tent. I held my breath, my grip on the flashlight tightening until my knuckles turned white. There was a moment of dreadful silence, and then the tent fabric began to bulge inward, as if something was pressing against it from the outside. I couldn't take it anymore. I unzipped the tent and burst out, my flashlight beam darting wildly. The clearing was empty, but the oppressive feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. I spun around, trying to catch sight of whatever was tormenting me, but there was nothing, just trees and shadows. Suddenly I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness watching me. They were too high off the ground to belong to any animal I knew of, and they radiated a malevolent intelligence. I stumbled backward, my mind screaming at me to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. The eyes began to move toward me, slowly, deliberately. In a panic, I turned and fled, my flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand. I ran blindly through the forest branches, tearing at my clothes and skin. The whispers rising again, all around me. I don't know how long I ran. Time lost all meaning in that nightmare. Eventually, I burst out of the trees and into the faint light of dawn. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. When I finally found the strength to stand, I realized I was near the edge of the forest. I stumbled back to my tent, packed up in a frantic hurry, and fled on foot, leaving everything else behind. The whispers still echoed in my ears as I ran, but I dared not look back. I made it to the nearest town by midday, breathless and shaken. People stared at me strangely as I stumbled into a diner, desperately needing warmth and comfort. I tried to explain what had happened to the waitress, but she just gave me a sympathetic smile and offered me a cup of coffee. To this day, I avoid the woods at night. The memory of those glowing eyes and the haunting whispers follows me everywhere, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks beyond the safety of civilization. After that harrowing night in the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The memory of those glowing eyes haunted my dreams, and the whispers echoed in my mind like a sinister melody. I tried to go about my daily life, but an unease settled deep within me, a constant reminder of the darkness I had encountered weeks past without incident. But I knew I couldn't ignore what had happened one evening. Curiosity and a lingering dread drove me back to the edge of that forbidding forest. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the familiar path leading into the trees. Every step felt heavier than the last, the forest seeming to grow darker with each passing minute. As I approached the clearing where I had camped that fateful night, a chill ran down my spine. The air was thick with an unnatural silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. I stopped at the spot where my tent had stood, half expecting to see some trace of the terrifying presence that had haunted me. Nothing seemed amiss. Yet the atmosphere was charged with an eerie energy. I hesitated, uncertain whether to continue further into the heart of the forest or turn back and leave this place behind forever. But something compelled me forward, a need to confront the unknown and find closure. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest into shadow. I moved cautiously, my senses on high alert. Every snap of a twig, every whisper of the wind made me jump, my nerves raw with anticipation. I reached the clearing where I had first heard the whispers, now eerily silent under the blanket of night. Then I saw them again, those glowing eyes watching me from the darkness. They were closer now, more distinct, and filled with a hungering malevolence that sent a shiver through my soul. Fear gripped me like a vice, but I couldn't tear my gaze away this time. I had to face whatever lurked within these woods, as if in response to my silent challenge. The eyes moved forward, the shadows coalescing into a form, a figure that seemed to materialize from the night itself. It stood before me, tall and imposing, radiating a palpable aura of menace. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. "What are you?" I managed to choke out my voice, barely above a whisper. The figure remained silent, its glowing eyes fixed on mine, with an intensity that made my knees weak. Suddenly a voice echoed in my mind, a whisper that bypassed my ears and spoke directly to my thoughts. "You have trespassed into our realm." It intoned its words, echoing with ancient authority. "You have disturbed the balance." I staggered back, the weight of its words settling heavily on my shoulders. I didn't mean to," I stammered, struggling to find my voice. I needed to understand." The figure regarded me for a long moment, its expression unreadable. Then slowly it raised a hand that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. I braced myself, unsure of what was to come, but instead of striking out, the figure extended its hand towards me, palm upturned. "Take this," it said, its voice softer now, almost pleading. a token of understanding, a glimpse into the truth you seek. I hesitated, unsure whether to trust this apparition or flee while I still could, but curiosity and a sense of destiny prevailed. I reached out my hand, trembling, as it met the figure's. A surge of energy coursed through me, filling my mind with images, visions of ancient rituals of spirits bound to the land of a pact, broken by unwitting intruders. I saw the forest through their eyes, a sanctuary disrupted by human presence, and felt their sorrow and rage as quickly as it had come. The vision faded, leaving me breathless and disoriented. The figure withdrew its hand, its eyes searching mine. "Remember what you have seen," it whispered, its voice fading like the wind through leaves. "Respect the balance, and the forest will show you mercy." With that cryptic warning, the figure dissolved into mist, blending seamlessly with the shadows. I stood alone in the clearing, shaken but enlightened. The forest around me seemed quieter now, as if the spirits had withdrawn, satisfied that their message had been delivered. I turned and walked away, my mind buzzing with questions and revelations. The fear that had gripped me for so long began to ebb, replaced by a newfound respect for the mysteries of the natural world. I knew I would never forget what I had experienced, nor would I ever again enter these woods without acknowledging the unseen forces that dwelled within. And as I left the forest behind, once more I carried with me not just a story of fear and survival, but a deeper understanding of the fragile balance between humanity and the unknown. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night in the forest stayed with me, haunting my every waking moment and infiltrating my dreams. It was as if the forest itself had left an indelible mark on my soul. I found myself drawn back to the edge of the woods, unable to resist the pull of the unknown. The balance that the figure had spoken of weighed heavily on my mind, and I knew that my understanding of it was far from complete. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a dim twilight, I made my way back to the spot where I had encountered the figure. The whispers and the eyes, the forest, seemed to recognize me as I stepped onto the path, the air thickening with the same eerie silence that had enveloped me before. Every step felt like a descent into a world beyond my own, where the rules of reality no longer applied. I reached the clearing, my breath hitching as I saw the faint outline of the old campsite. Everything looked as it had that night, the shadows playing tricks on my mind and making the trees appear to move. I stood there for a long moment, letting the fear wash over me, and then fade, replaced by a determination to uncover the truth that had been offered to me. The darkness deepened, and the forest seemed to close in around me. The whispers began softly at first, just a murmur on the wind, but growing louder, more insistent. I knew better now than to ignore them or to call out instead. I closed my eyes and listened, trying to discern the meaning behind the cacophony of voices. As I focused, the whispers began to form words, fragmented phrases that spoke of ancient pacts and forgotten rituals. I could feel the presence of the spirits around me, watching, waiting for my response. The fear that had once paralyzed me now pushed me forward, guiding me deeper into the heart of the forest. I moved slowly, carefully, my senses heightened, every sound and shadow a potential clue to the mysteries that lay hidden. The forest was alive, with an energy that I could feel pulsing beneath my feet. And in the air around me, it was as if the trees themselves were speaking to me, their whispers mingling with those of the spirits. Suddenly the path opened into a larger clearing, in the center of which stood a massive oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like ancient arms. The ground beneath it was worn smooth as if countless feet had tread upon it. Over the centuries, I approached the tree, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew instinctively that this was a place of great significance. As I stood before the tree, the whispers reached a fever pitch, the voices blending into a single, powerful chant. I felt a presence beside me and turned to see the figure from before its eyes, glowing with the same malevolent intelligence, but now tempered with a sense of purpose. "You have returned." The figure's voice echoed in my mind, a mix of surprise and approval. "You seek to understand the balance." I knotted my throat too tight to speak. The figure gestured to the base of the tree, where a small stone altar stood, covered in moss and ancient symbols. "This is the heart of our realm." It said, "the place where the spirits gather to protect and to guide." I knelt before the altar, my fingers tracing the intricate carvings that told the story of the forest and its guardians. As I did, a wave of understanding washed over me. The visions from before returning with greater clarity, I saw the rituals that had been performed here, the offerings made to maintain the balance and the consequences of disturbing that delicate equilibrium. The figure placed a hand on my shoulder, its touch surprisingly warm and grounding. "You have been chosen to bear witness to our history." It said, "to carry the knowledge of the Pact and to ensure that it is honored." I looked up at the figure, its eyes now filled with a strange kind of compassion. "I will do my best," I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of the responsibility. The figure nodded slowly. "Remember what you have learned." It said, "Respect the balance, and the forest will be your ally with that." The figure began to fade, its form dissolving into the night as the whispers quieted and the forest returned to its usual state of silence. I stood alone before the ancient tree, my mind and heart full of the knowledge and the promise I had made. As I made my way back through the forest, the path seemed clearer, the shadows less threatening. I carried with me a sense of purpose, a commitment to honor the pact and to protect the balance that the spirits had entrusted to me, leaving the forest behind. I knew that my life had been irrevocably changed. I had been given a glimpse into a world beyond my own, and with it, the responsibility to respect and uphold the fragile equilibrium between humanity and the natural world. And as I walked away from the edge of the woods, I felt a newfound sense of peace, knowing that I would never be truly alone, the spirits of the forest watching over me, guiding me on my journey. The end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as that really helps the channel.